Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Women in Leadership Signature Series, our last one of the year. And we're very fortunate today that we have Dr. DeRetta Rhodes with us. And I'll give you a fuller introduction to DeRetta in just a few minutes, but you'll see her beautiful face on the screen as we allow others to join us, and hopefully more and more will join us in just a few minutes, and we'll get started. But again, welcome. As you join us, it would be great to hear about your favorite Christmas tradition. So we thought we'd keep it light this morning and talk about, gee whiz, what are some of the favorite Christmas traditions that you all enjoy? So drop those into the chat if you don't mind, and we'll see what comes up. I know for ours, we do everything Christmas morning and Christmas Day, and just have lots of children around and open gifts. And it's usually pretty early in the morning. And then we save the one last special gift that we've gotten for one another to the very end. And then we have a cinnamon rolls and coffee and juice and just collapse. What about you, DeRetta? What kind of Christmas tradition do you guys like to honor?
So I think one of the things for us is the anticipation of Christmas Day. So we do all of these things Christmas Eve and Christmas Eve evening. One of the things we watch is A Wonderful Life. And so it's not like you don't know the story because you watch it every year, but it just is such a very warming and heartfelt. And so we do that, and we do lots of eating on Christmas Eve, Christmas Eve night, in anticipation for Christmas.
Yes, yes. When I married my Italian husband, one of the things that I forgot about is it's very traditional to hold a 7 fishes dinner on Christmas Eve. So go have the 7 fishes dinner, go to church, and so on. But it's become quite the thing to try and find 7 different fishes to eat on Christmas Eve. But I do my best. Let's see, we've got Kathy says she opens one present on Christmas Eve. And Denise Simpkins, welcome. Decorating the house and tree with the family while holiday music is playing with wine and spirits. Oh, that sounds beautiful. We watch Die Hard on Christmas Day. And it is a Christmas movie. I didn't know that. I did not know that. Annette, you do the 7 fishes too. Very Italian family. Tirabasso, I guess that would be Italian. So, well, welcome to you guys. Any other Christmas traditions that you all want to tell us about? Take the family pictures in matching pajamas. Hey, welcome, Alicia. Take family pictures in matching pajamas. I bet that's fun. I could never get my husband to do something like that. Never, ever. So, and then Kim Page says volunteering at the women's shelter and the seniors home and singing and gift wrapping Christmas Eve. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right. Well, we should go ahead and get started. We've got a great group that's joined us today. And so thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. As we go through our discussion, our dialogue with DeRetta today, go ahead and submit your questions, whatever questions you may have, into the chat. And then towards the end, we'll get to those, but feel free to drop any questions into the chat. And so we won't address them as we go along, but we will address them towards the end. And so today we are really excited to speak with Dr. DeRetta Rhodes. She's the Executive Vice President and Chief People Capital Officer of the World Series champions, the Atlanta Braves. Wow, this was so exciting. We had already asked DeRetta to join us for the Women in Leadership Signature Series. So when they won, this was especially exciting. She not only oversees all people initiatives for the Braves, but also, get this, very large set of responsibilities, but also for the 6 minor league affiliates across the United States and the Dominican Republic, and also for the Battery Atlanta, which is a work, live, play area associated with the ballpark. You all may know about that, but another big set of responsibilities. Prior to the Braves organization, Dr. Rhodes was the Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer of the YMCA of Metro Atlanta. She was the Vice President of HR at First Data. And before that, she was Vice President of HR for Turner Broadcasting. And she also held several leadership roles at Ernst & Young, ADP, HomeGrocer.com, and the Yum brand. She's homegrown. She attended the University of Georgia for her undergraduate degree, and then Clark Atlanta University for her MBA, and then back to UGA for her PhD. She's been recognized as a Woman of Excellence in 2018 among the 100 Women of Influence by the Atlanta Business Chronicle in 2020, and then a distinguished alumni of the University of Georgia also in 2020. But I think her story is really between the lines of her bio. She has persevered through dismissal and diminishment along her career as a woman of color, before ultimately achieving this top people role for the Braves. She delivered a TEDx talk, which is really, really good, and I highly recommend it. And in that talk, she lays out her pursuit of acknowledgement as a leader worthy of being among the top 4% in the United States who are Black and hold management positions out of all of the 46% total women in the workforce. So let me say that again. She's among the top 4%, or the 4% in the United States who are Black and hold management positions out of 46% total women in the workforce. Not a good number. She's a true champion of women, and especially Black women. She is, so it's just an amazing honor for us to welcome Dr. Rhodes to what I think is a virtual platform that is very much aligned with your purpose and your passion. So welcome, DeRetta. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. I am so glad to be here with you all this morning.
Well, so we can get to know you a little bit more on a personal basis. Are you game to answering a few fun, quick questions?
Of course.
Okay, good. So what are your top 3 bucket list items?
So if I think about them, one of them is skydiving. I am a huge thrill seeker. It is so funny. We do a family trip with my sons and my parents every other year. And this year we're going to Universal Studios. So skydiving would be the first one. I've always wanted to go to Italy and have not had the opportunity to do that. And then the other thing, I don't know if people have started watching Yellowstone with Kevin Costner. I am like fascinated with all of that. So the next bucket list item would be going to a dude ranch in either Montana or Wyoming.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. By the way, I mentioned earlier that my husband's Italian and his family's from Amalfi. Thank you very much, God. So if you want any information about Amalfi, been there many, many times. All right. So favorite podcast?
Brene Brown. So I love everything Brene Brown. And I think when I started going to the research that I was doing for myself personally, she has an amazing TED Talk around shame, and it's the research that she did. And so I have found her body of work, what she does, just how she does her research has been amazing, because I think in the back of my mind, I want to be considered a researcher. And so she's my go-to every single time.
I agree. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird. But then, and it's so funny because my husband is a night owl, and sometimes those two do come together. But I'm typically the one that's up very early.
Yeah. Mountains or ocean?
Ocean, because I am very cold natured. And so I prefer to be in heat anytime I can be in heat. So ocean, it would be.
Great. What's your favorite way to unwind after work?
So typically, and please don't judge me, I love to eat and drink. I love the whole concept of fellowship. So if I have an opportunity to be able to just engage with someone after work like that, that would be exactly what I would want to do.
Mm, yes, yes. Anytime, let me know. The book you're reading now?
So Brene Brown has a new one called Atlas at the Mapping. And so Atlas at the Heart. So it talks about, and how she's characterized this book is about mapping meaningful connection and the language of human experience. And I think for me, like I said, she's my go-to. And when I think about the work I do every single day, it's about that, especially when we dealt with such a very tumultuous time in 2020 and what that looked like, not only for the workforce, but for individuals personally. So that's the book I'm reading now.
I saw an interview with her about the book and how critical it is that we identify and use the proper language in identifying our emotions.
Yeah.
Because the language can actually drive our emotions and our feelings if we're not careful. All right. Finally, I had to throw this one in. Favorite Braves player?
It would be Hank Aaron. I had the opportunity before we lost him to spend time with him, and we were able to implement him and his wife, who are amazing, and his embodiment of leadership off the field has been very, to me, instructional for individuals here. We had the opportunity to launch our Hank Aaron Fellows this year. And so it is focused on bringing specifically students that are coming from an HBCU to learn the business of baseball. And so it's just everything that he did. I remember his office. I remember, the first spring training that I got to attend, and we were in Northport, Florida. We had just opened and I was there with him. So I see him in both veins, but that would be my favorite baseball player for the Atlanta Braves.
That's great. I when I think about Hank Aaron, I think about what a role model he is for other professional sports figures post baseball or post the sport, right?
Yeah,
what you do with life and the impact that he's had and can have on and others can have on younger generations.
So, well, and even the legacy. I mean, I know we'll get to this. I'm a huge baseball person. Have been all my life because I grew up in Kansas City and then moved here and had my adult life in Georgia, Atlanta. And so I was always close to the Negro League and understood what that was. I watched it with my grandfather and my grandmother. My sons ended up playing baseball and I ended up being a baseball mom. So just, I think the learnings that you get from that sports and how it has really been instrumental in our community. And so I agree with you on that. I could talk about that all day long.
Yeah, I bet. Speaking of which, you can talk about it a little bit more. We've got to know, what was it like for you, your family, your boys, everyone, when the Braves did win that last game in the series?
So first of all, in the regular season, we are playing 161 games. And so by the time you get to postseason, you are exhausted. Not only are you exhausted, it is going from game to game because you don't know what's going to happen. And I think if everyone recalls how our season was at the middle of the season, we had lost Acuna. There was a lot of rhetoric and press about we were out for the count. We were below 500. Like our numbers were not good. It just looked as if we weren't going to even make it to postseason. I will tell you what has been instrumental and what I had the opportunity to see up close is to watch our general manager, Alec Anthopoulos, change that around, bring in new talent. This is the importance of talent acquisition. I'll talk about that all day long. Bring in new talent and new players, how that turned that team around, and the fact that we did end up making it to the World Series. I will tell you, every step of the way from going to Milwaukee, to going to LA, to going to Houston, and if everybody recalls, we were always the underdog. And so it just was a very gratifying experience to watch, to see that team just rise outside of everything that everyone said. And so it was, I don't even know if I can describe what that was. So when you're in the midst of it, you're just kind of moving along, right? You're going from game to game. I think the hardest game that both our team and us had, and then even the fans, was October 31st, when everybody thought we were going to clinch the World Series here in Atlanta. That wasn't meant to be. It was meant for us to clinch it in Houston. And so that next game, that sixth game. And so just going through all of that, you were just exhausted. You were on adrenaline for the month of October when you're going through that experience.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just curious. It almost sounds like everyone in the organization felt as part of the team. It wasn't just the Braves are out here and the back office, the administrative staff is over here.
No.
Is that a true sense that I'm having?
It is. It is. And I will tell you, it has to do, again, with our leadership in baseball operations. So Alex Anthopoulos, Brian Snit, we call him Snit, who's absolutely amazing. He can tell you this fascinating story about him and his career and how Hank Aaron supported him. He was a champion of him because 2 times they wanted to fire Snit, and look at him today. He was part of the minor league affiliate before he came forward. And so it's so funny. We had our holiday party, and we really wanted to make sure that we had a party that recognized us as world champions. And he comes up to me and he hugs me and he says, "I just want to thank you." And I'm like, "Thank me? Like, I didn't do anything. You all did all the work." And everyone is it is definitely a perspective that everyone is a part of what that win is and was.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, let's switch gears and focus on the topic of the morning. And I already mentioned that you gave this excellent TEDx talk about how you had to overcome several personal and professional challenges as a woman of color. And to be able to get to this position that you hold of senior leadership, that you did not just want to survive, but you wanted to thrive. So I'm just curious, and oh, by the way, the link to the TED Talk has been put in the chat area, so that's great. Where did this perseverance come from that you speak of in the TED Talk?
So one of the things that I have been very blessed is that I've had very strong women in my family. So I think it would start with my grandmother. My grandparents lived on a farm in Arkansas. My parents grew up in Arkansas. They all went to the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. My grandmother graduated with her degree, and she was an elementary school teacher. And so I had been fortunate to understand the importance of education and what that meant. And my grandmother accepted nothing but excellence. And so I think as I was growing up as a little girl, I went there every summer and stayed every summer with her until I turned 16. And I had this very special relationship with my grandmother as a result of that. And so when I made the decision to go back and get my doctorate, I lost her in the middle of getting my doctorate. But when I made that decision, one of the things that grandmother would always say to me is, regardless of what is going on, you have to push through. And, and she did that, and she showed me that. And it was so funny when I would go to Arkansas. It's a little small town called Grady, Arkansas. No one would ever know where it is because you can drive right by, you wouldn't know. She had such this influential impact in her community because she was an elementary school teacher, and people would come back to her grown and talk to her. And she had this just amazing perseverance around people. And I remember her telling me, like, if I would get mad with my mother, she would say to me, "That's not kind, that's not nice, that's not what we do." And I was like, well, I'm still mad. She would be like, "Well, get over it." So I just remember all of that she poured into me, and the grace. And then I saw it, and I grew up with it with my mother. I watched my mother go back and get her master's when my brother and I where I would want to say I was 13 at the time. My brother was 7 years younger than me. And I remember her going to class and she would make us sit outside. I can't even tell you the building, but she would make us sit outside and in this little entrance way. And she would bring us snacks and make sure we were taken care of. And the fact that now that I am a mother and I know what it looks like to be a single mother, to have, gone through the educational experience during that time, I now understand the sacrifices she made and what she did. And so to watch these two women that are very quiet, stated leaders, they don't go around talking about things. They don't say it. They have grace that I can't even measure up to. Yeah. That has been so impactful for me. And so I can hear my grandmother sometimes talking to me, like if I'm in a situation with work or whatever the case may be, I can hear her talking to me around, I need for you, regardless of what's going on, I need for you to remember poise and grace and to be kind. And so that's one of the things that I think has been helpful for me as I've moved along and have not necessarily always been supported in my career. So, or in my education pursuits.
So those words of wisdom, to be nice or be kind, and to be filled with grace. I would think that would imply toward others, right?
Yes.
In your talk, you talked about some of the not so nice feedback that you would get from in your career as you were moving throughout your career. And some of it was not very positive. Some of it was negative.
Yes.
And we often say that negative feedback sticks to the brain like Velcro, whereas positive feedback often just slips off the brain like Teflon.
Right.
So how did you not allow that negative feedback to stick to the brain, and then continue to persevere and and maybe you did, I don't know, but
I was getting ready to say, it still sticks. It still sticks.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that it still sticks. And I just was having a conversation with a younger professional here within the Atlanta Braves. And she was coming to talk to me because she was like, I would love to be mentored by you. And I tell people that come to me and say that, it's reciprocity. So I'm sure that during this process, you will be mentoring me as well, because I do think we all are always learning. And so I think one of the things for me is that when those experiences happen, and I'll give an example of one, I would remember my grandmother telling me that regardless, you still need to move forward, right? So whether I feel like an imposter, and I can tell you weekly, I feel that way, like, oh, am I really supposed to be here? Like, what just happened, So I have to take those experiences, but I will tell you, every negative experience has come back and been positive. That's another thing that my grandmother would always say too, is that just what's in the moment right now does not mean that that is going to be what is forever. So I'll never forget, I had one of my professors who I was taking one of my courses. It was specifically about writing your literary review. So what that means is that you've got to come up with all this research to support what you're substantiating or saying in your research. And so I was working full time. I think at that time I had just recently gotten divorced. So my sons were like 8 and 10 or somewhere along there. And I'm driving back and forth for these classes, sometimes late. We know Atlanta traffic. I'm trying to get to Athens. And we were finishing up a conversation. And he said to me, you're not committed to this. And I don't see you graduating. I see you all but dissertation. And, you're sitting there, and I couldn't respond at the time because I have a professor who's telling me that I'm not going to graduate and that I was not committed. And so I drove all the way back from Athens to Atlanta. I think I sobbed the whole time there. I get home, I have to deal with my sons. I like in a fetal position in my bed. And the next morning, I remember I just could hear my grandmother saying, that's not your truth. That is not your truth. Everyone does not know your story. That's not your truth. People don't know what you have going on. I need for you to, and I could hear her just as if she was standing in the room. The interesting story about that, although it took me 7 years to finish, when I graduated, my major professor was in South Africa. She's an amazing woman. She was in South Africa. So when you, at the University of Georgia, when you graduate with your doctorate, they hood you. So you actually walk across the stage and they hood you. The same gentleman that said that I would be all the dissertation and would not graduate had to hood me.
Interesting.
So when that happened, now mind you, it was time away from him saying I would never graduate or I wouldn't graduate. In that moment, it was gratifying to me for me to have walked across the stage. He had to hood me, and my sons got to see me graduate.
Yes.
So that's when I sometimes talk to people about the moment right now is not the period of what's supposed to happen. And so that's been those things that have occurred to me. So I try to keep them in the back of my mind when I'm sitting in the midst of, just muck.
Well, what I love is your grandmother's comment about this is not your truth.
Yeah.
This is not your truth. This does not have to be the end of your story, in other words. Yeah.
No.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So let's move on to further on in your career, because I know you had some experiences of what we call microaggressions.
Yeah.
So what is your advice for women of color and perhaps any woman struggling with microaggressions at work, or what we call the detractors in the workplace, sort of similar to the detractor in your PhD program, the professor? That is, being dismissed, being questioned in terms of your judgment, being talked over or interrupted in meetings, maybe even to the point of overhearing derogative gender or racial kinds of comments. So what's your advice to women?
And I will tell you, microaggressions, it's an equal opportunist. Like they show up regardless of your color or creed. And I think for us as women, we experience it in such a blatant way that oftentimes I don't think men see it as a blatant way. So it's funny that you asked that question, because one of the things that I always do, I sit in meetings, and it's funny because I think I have right here. I sit in meetings, I do, where I'm writing notes. So it ends up being my journal, my notes, whatever. And so if there's something that happens in a specific meeting, or someone is either inappropriate or they say something that you deem is not appropriate, in some cases you can address it in that space right then and there. And in some instances, if it's not, what I do is I write it down and I come back and have a conversation in a very polite matter of speaking, but I would speak to it. I think oftentimes if we don't speak to what the situation is, and when I say speak to it, I don't mean run around telling other people, going directly to that individual and having that conversation. What I have found 9 times out of 10, now you've got some of those people that are jerks and they're like, what are you talking about? I didn't do X, Y, Z. But you oftentimes have individuals or men that said that wasn't my intent. That wasn't what I meant to do. And I think in some of our situations, for me, it's important for me to do it where I am today, because I need for our male counterparts to understand what this looks like. And I don't know if my younger professionals in our organization are going to feel comfortable enough to do that. So I think we have to start thinking about shifting and having those conversations. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't feel comfortable doing that very early on in my career. I probably have become a lot more bold with doing it. And I think that probably comes with age. But I want us to get to a point, and when I say we, I want us as women to get to a point where we are very comfortable using our voices. And that doesn't mean we're raising it or we're angry, but we are actually voicing our perspective, because that is critical for us to shift this number that we're dealing with that continues to have us not in positions that we should be in. And I know that's hard. I mean, there's sometimes where I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm gonna have to say something. Like, I can't let this go. Like, I'm doing a self-talk and I'm like, I can't let this go, because if I don't say anything, no one's going to say anything. And I just think we have to recall that. Now, if you're in situations and you can't say it, like I said, in the moment, you write it down and you think of other ways to address it, or you think of other ways to engage with someone to have that conversation. I think I'm fortunate from the standpoint that I can say certain things and I can speak to, well, if you are thinking and feeling that, why don't you join one of our committees with the diversity, equity, and inclusion committee? Why don't you? So there's a way for me to get individuals awareness. And once you have the awareness, I'm hoping you then would shift your perspective. But this is what I'll say. And this is kind of my alter ego. I am Laura Croft every day, like I am in combat every single day. And it's one of those things you can't let up. You've got to continue to do that. But I think it's important for us as women to be able to strengthen that muscle and begin to be comfortable around our speech, our language, and how we express that.
Yeah. And there are times when things are not done equally. So where there's an absence, so not being considered to interview for a new position where everybody else has been asked, or not being equally treated in some form or fashion. So your grandmother's voice is being kind, be full of grace. So how do you balance that? It sounds like you do the approach, you approach the individual or the focus of your concern. You come from a place of this may not have been your intent, or what was your intent? So it's more from a curiosity perspective than it is from a, I am not to be treated that way, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Have I got that right?
You do. And I think, so for me, I have learned that there are moments in time and when you have to wait in terms of framing it and bringing it back. I love what Catherine just said about warrior. I think about my grandmother, although she said be kind, and she was a quiet warrior. Like her perspective was that you stay in there, you still have you still move forward and you push it through. And I'll be honest, there are leaders and there are individuals that it hasn't worked with well, but my perspective on that is that I at least said it. And at some point in time, it'll come back to them. Because I have had individuals come back to me and say, when you said such and such, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, that meant I made some level of impact that you're still thinking about what I said to you 3 or 4 years ago. Or I've had people that come back to me that I've worked with before that have said, I really appreciated the conversations that we had here. Because sometimes we sit in a very lonely place. And it's like you're doing these things and you don't feel like there's anybody to the left or to the right of you that is supporting you, and you're moving through it. And that's one thing I need for us as women to begin to do a better job of. Like, we need to come in and support one another, because oftentimes the fight I'm having, and you're having, or Catherine's having, or anyone is having that, and we don't need to feel like we're doing that fight by ourselves.
Yes.
And that's a challenge sometimes, because sometimes we are the only ones that are sitting in the room that's the only female, right?
Yes.
Or I do have individuals who've come to me and said, I brought up this idea, and all of a sudden Brad brought it up and it was his and it was great. And I said, and I've had that happen to me too. But what I relish in is that, but you took the idea, and then you can build from that, right? Because typically if someone takes your idea, they've got to figure out how to implement it or execute it. They're going to come back around to you at some point in time to do that, right? So then you take advantage of that particular situation and leverage what just happened.
Yes, absolutely. And as Susan Hitchcock has said, too often the person doesn't get any feedback. And so they're not aware, and it's a matter of creating some awareness, as you mentioned, and then that awareness plants the seed that perhaps will grow into full-blown awareness and to a better action.
And I think we as women, if we're if we have men that are reporting to us that are not strong or comfortable in giving feedback to women, we get lost with what that feedback is. And I do think we have to have a very strong self-awareness and figuring out how to get that. I have been blessed where I've had both women and female leaders, men and female leaders who have been very specific in giving me feedback. Like my first leader, when I got my first job after my master's, and he's still a mentor, he's still to me a champion to this day and a friend now. Rodney gave me really tough feedback very early on, and I appreciated that. And then as I move forward, I would ask for it. Please let me know what I'm doing. I really want to also address what Kim just asked about the stereotype of angry Black women. And I think what happens for us that does occur, and I think it goes back to, again, the book that Brene Brown has just written about language and how language shows up. It is so funny. I have my assistant who's worked with me for many years. So she worked with me at Turner, and then she's come back to work with me at the Atlanta Braves. And so there's a technique she says I use, and I didn't even realize I was using it. But when I get frustrated or angry, I drop my voice and I lower it. So, and I become much more specific in how I say things. So what happens is when you end up doing that, it shifts the flow of the conversation. And it's difficult for people to say, oh, is she angry? Wait, I'm not quite sure what just happened. Like, she's being very deliberate in her speech. What just happened? And so I think there are techniques that we can use. The one thing that I have found, and I just have to say this, is that it's so funny. I hear this story about women are so emotional. I can't tell you that that's the case. I work with men and they are all emotional about everything. And maybe it's because it's sports. Maybe that's what happens, but it's just not sports that I've seen this. And I think if we have a high EQ around how we handle our emotions and how we go into things, it makes a huge difference in terms of how individuals engage with us. Yes. So I do believe people say, oh, there is a stereotype, but I don't. There's a way for us to use techniques where it doesn't look angry. It looks very, I am coming to you objectively. My voice has been lowered and I am speaking to you very specifically and deliberate. And I think that helps as it shifts the conversation. But I wanted to address Kim because I do think that's something that we as Black women get all the time.
Yes, yes. And the whole stereotype that women are overly emotional. Yes. And that emotions like that don't belong at work, that sort of thing. Yes, absolutely. So, and what we often talk about at TurkNet is emotional mastery and how critical that is to leadership character and how we build trust over time through the connections we make and using emotional mastery, which can be eliminated in a nanosecond through the total loss of or negative emotions, the anger, the yelling, the whatever it might be, and how that can all just create a vortex of negative emotions throughout the entire organization. So emotional mastery is the key. In other words,
I love that.
Right, that balance.
Yep.
All right, so back to your TED Talk.
Yes.
And you gave that back in 2010, I believe, right? And then you, during that talk, you quoted the Lean In research at the time that found that women of color compose only 4%, as we talked about, of top corporate jobs. And despite the advances that women overall have made upwardly, the newest research from Lean In says that still there's only 4% of the C-suite positions held by women of color. So literally no change 11 years later.
Right.
So what do you think is keeping women of color from advancing at the same rates as white women?
I think the difference that we're seeing and that we're experiencing is that it comes down to being championed in the organization or being championed, period. And I think for us as Black women, we don't have that level of access sometimes. We just don't. we work really hard. We get all of the degrees that we're supposed to have. We move forward and show up that way. But the other challenge to that is actually having access and having champions in the organization. Or when I say champions, it just doesn't have to be an organization. If you start working and supporting and being part of nonprofit boards or whatever it is, for you to begin to build your basically board of champions. But let me tell you what's interesting about that. And this is something that's come out very recently, because there's always been the talk about mentors, and mentors are important. Oftentimes, you will not know who your champion is. That's these individuals that are sitting in a room, and when decisions are being made about projects, assignments, promotions, who's in that room that is your champion. And there have been times I didn't even know I had a champion. My biggest example is when I was at Turner Broadcasting, and I had the executive vice president contact me and said that they wanted me to go on assignment in Hong Kong. And the assignment had to happen in 2 weeks, and I was going to be there, and so forth and on. And I had no idea. I can't tell you how that happened. It was an amazing experience. I got to learn so much about being in a new country. What are the business streams that we were doing there? It was amazing. But someone in that room that was making a decision about that assignment called my name up. And so this is what I say, and this is where where people get real confused. And I get it. It's about what are you doing and how are you networking, and how are you engaging, and what is your brand that people are wanting to engage back with you. Mm-hmm. And so I think when we focus on that, that's when you begin to have champions. And when you find that you are in situations where you're being called upon to do different projects or be part of boards. I've had people now that have called and said, hey, DeRetta, we've heard about you on this particular board. We'd love for you to come work with us on this board. And so it has been kind of a springboard for support. Mm-hmm. We as Black women don't necessarily have that. And I think having that as an opportunity, both there's a responsibility that we individually should have, but there's also a responsibility, quite frankly, the organization should have as well, in terms of thinking about the women and the women of color that are in their organizations, and how are they shepherding them through the organizations and providing them the same opportunity. Well, it's funny, I play ed golf. I'm not a golfer, but I play ed it. My dad taught me that when I graduated from college. And there are things that happen on the golf course. And so I am talking to our men professionals and saying, what are other ways that you can engage? What are other ways that you can think about making sure everyone is included, and then you have access to individuals you may not have had access before? So there's got to be an intentionality for our leaders as well to do this and make that happen. And I have 2 CEOs that I worked for, and they are amazing at that. And you can see that, and they too have supported me through my career, and I can call them anytime and talk to them as well. But I think it's not one silver bullet, and it's one of those things where we as Black women need to lift up sometimes, and we need to network. We need to be on different boards. We need to have those type of experiences. But I also have a call to action for our leaders within our organizations too.
I agree totally. Well said. And there is such a thing as this hidden job market. And so as senior leaders come together and they discuss, we're going to restructure, we need a new director role here, or we need a new general manager role here. And so there's this discussion that takes place, and it may or may not be posted.
That's right. That's right.
And I know it's not right, but it happens. And so instead of casting the net widely for everyone to have equal access to that job, it can be filled by what you're just suggested, the champions in the organization. And if you don't have one, then you are going to miss out. So that does make a lot of sense. All women of color especially, need to make sure that they are networking appropriately out of confidence and courage to speak up for themselves and for the organization. All right, so I'm just curious, you wrote your dissertation called Courage on Fire, Black Women Who Survive Corporate America. Where did that title come from, and what was the basis of your dissertation?
So let me tell you what's so funny about that. My title actually was The Success Factors of Black Women in Corporate. That's what it started out as. As I started getting into the research, so there were 13 women that I interviewed in my research. As my major professor and I were going through the research, and we were listening to a lot of the things that were being said and the themes that were coming out of it, she looked at me one day, because she was in Macon at the time, and she looked at me one day and she said, as we were going through this, she said, "This is not about success, it's about survival." So when she and I started having this dialogue and conversations, because I too was one of the individuals that was interviewed. So I did an interview. So it ended up being like an ethnography, as well as I was also part of the study. And as she started saying that, she was absolutely right. So we were able to start lifting themes and comments and things that were being said about, I am actually going through this, and it is about survival, because there's all these roles that I have as a Black female, whether it's in my community, with my family, with my kids, whatever it is, and what I am having to do when I come to work and shift those things. I am surviving. I am not in a situation where it feels like success. And that's why I think there's such an interesting perspective in terms of language and words that are used. And so when we started doing that, it's almost like, and the research came off of the pages, because it was so hard to identify success as opposed to survival. And so when that happened, it was easier to identify, what are the things, what are the recommendations, what are we seeing, what are the true challenges for Black women, because I was very specific about it being Black women in my dissertation. And I tell people this all the time, because I wanted to graduate. If I had done the stratosphere, I would still be working on this. So I wanted to graduate. And I knew afterwards I could add all women, because there's so many different parallels for all of us, for women of color and all women that are dealing with this. And so that was the thing that happened. And it's so funny, behind the scenes, it's one of those things, editing when you're doing a movie, that was an editable part of my dissertation, and how we got from success to survival. And how I think that there's been even a greater appreciation for, it's still survival. It is still, like I was talking to someone yesterday where I was saying, like I mentioned to you all, I still feel, and I talk about this in my dissertation, isolated. I still feel as if I'm the only one, specifically in my organization. Some of it has to do with the work I do. Like, I can't go around talking to everyone about what's going on. That's some of it. But some of it also sits with who I am and where I reside. And there's not a connectivity within my organization, no fault to them. Then I have to find it in other ways. I have to figure out other ways for me to get that, so that I can come back and be better for the organization. But it did not start out as survival. It started out as success, and we knew we had to pivot.
And is it true that this dissertation is becoming a book?
Yes. So I am in the throes of shifting it into a book. And much to what I said, although my dissertation was specifically focused on Black women, I am expanding it to all women. The other thing that I also have in there, that it is going to be a chapter specifically on men and what they are as champions and what their responsibilities are. I think I have been thrust into a very interesting situation, because I have all sons. I have no girls. And I work in a very male dominated, not that they all aren't, but mine is very much so. And so I also have had male mentors and male champions and male leaders that have been instrumental. So the reality to this is that this is just not a female thing.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing I talk about in my TED Talk, is that this is a responsibility of everyone. So in part of my book, there's a chapter that is specific to and about men, because I want to make sure I'm being inclusive with not only the research that I started with, but also this impact that needs to happen in organizations that is made up of men and women. And
Mhm.
so it'll be much more expanded, but I am working on that. So if anybody knows a literary agent, because that's what I'm trying to find, let me know, because I'm in the process of putting all of it together so I can package it so that we can put it into a book.
In your spare time.
In my spare time. And I
Wow.
say we because I have a village. So I have a village of people that are constantly saying to me, where are you on your book? Where are you on your book? So yes.
Well, as we've talked about, the 4% of
Yes.
all the top positions in corporate America are held by African American or women of color. So what do you think, other than what we've spoken of so far, what else can we do to grow that number?
It's so that's the one thing I think that is a catching point for me. The one thing I want to bring up, and the one thing about my research, is that I'm going back to several of these women, and a lot of them have opted out of corporate. So
Yeah.
what you're seeing is that the reason the 4% is staying is because we're not doing succession planning. There's not a bench for women to come in and for them to then expand that. We have us that are opting out of being in it. We're deciding to be entrepreneurs. We're deciding to do other things because either of the fatigue and weariness of being in a corporate environment, or the notion that I continue to do this and where's the progress happening? So I think when you look at that 4% number, it has to do with both individuals exiting and us still not having enough in the pipeline to move that forward. And
Mhm.
so I think when we start talking about that, what are the things we need to do? Because our younger women are looking at these these different things in the organization and saying, do I really want to do this? I have to make different decisions about if I want to have a family, if I want to do X, Y, Z. Do I really want to do this? And they're opting out. So we've got to figure out a way where we continue to build that bench. And then for us that are sitting in these positions, we need to think about what are we doing to pull individuals up and support them so that they can be the next generation. And what we do is we actually broaden that number, and it's no longer 4%, it's 5, it's 6, it's 10, it's 15. But we've got to have, I think, a two-pronged approach to doing this. Because opting out is, I don't want to say easy, but you get to a point where you're weary at this level. And so we've got to figure out, how do we support each other and how do we bring individuals along? And we're able to broaden that number and that gap.
Yeah. And to exasperate it all, we have the phenomenon called the Great Resignation going on right now.
That's right.
And sadly, according to the research, women are experiencing a lot higher rates of burnout in the workplace than men are. And it's so much so that the 2021 Lean In research, anyway, reports that 1 out of every 3 women are considering downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce altogether. So to your point, we're losing them. We're leaking them out of the
Yes,
pipeline.
right.
So what do you, we've talked about a little bit about, trying to hold on to this talent in some form or fashion. What is HR's role specifically in stemming employee burnout, the sense of overwhelm, high levels of stress, that's contributing especially to women leaving the workforce?
So I'll tell you what's interesting, and I shamefully say this, is that prior to 2020, in everything that I focused on in my role in HR, one of them was not mental health. So I focused on performance management and processes, and I never focused on mental health until 2020. And when I say focus, I mean, I did not think about programming. I did not think about vendor. I didn't think about those things because we just moved along and did what you thought you needed to do, right? Engagement surveys and so forth and so on. I think 2020 gave us a license that we needed to start doing that. And I'm very shameful from the standpoint that I didn't think about it before now. But and I'll speak to it specific to what happened specifically in the sports industry and specifically in baseball. So if everyone recalls, as the pandemic was kind of getting its strength, I would say, it was in March. We closed our offices March 15th. Opening day was April 5th. So everyone had thought, oh, it'll be a couple weeks. We'll be back for opening day. And we weren't. As we moved further along and we saw that there wasn't going to be any sports, and we were in a very different situation from a timing perspective than basketball and football, because basketball and football was later. We were smack dab coming into our season. And so we had to pivot. We had to pivot and shift quickly, and we didn't know what that looked like. Mm-hmm. And it was game day staff that we no longer could have here because we weren't having games. It was the fact that we were not open. It was, and I will tell you, my chairman was like, I'm coming in every day. And I was like, but we can't have anybody else come in. So it was those conversations that we were having to have. And we had to really think about our organization. And at the same time, we were dealing with George Floyd and the social injustice and everything that was happening in the country. And we had to furlough. We had to look and shift our organization very dramatically. And we had never done that. So one of the things that became very important to me is that as people were not only dealing with the pandemic, they were dealing with social issues. They were dealing with, you're now at home and you never have been at home and you've got your kids. And if you have elderly, like it had reached a level that we had to think and respond differently. And so my team, along with our parent company and along with our healthcare partner, were amazing. Like we started triaging and doing things around mental health. We started sending things out. We started our community, the arm of our community and our foundation started doing things in the community with our game day staff. Like we had to come up we had to pivot really quickly. And as a result of that, it gave me a true appreciation for mental health and what we needed to do more of. I would like to say we've done a better job of that. We've looked at other partners we could bring in. We're partnering with Bright Horizons now that helps support for elderly and childcare and all of those things, but I hadn't thought about that before, right? And, I don't want to say, this was the positive thing coming out of a pandemic, but it definitely was an intentional thing coming out of the pandemic that we had to think more of. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I shamefully did not do that. Like walking through my career, I did EAP, right? Oh, EAP, that's easy. It is so much more now, and the engagement of our staff is critical for them to be not only in a healthy space. They talk about a financial space. It's all of those things. The holistic person is something we have to consider now.
Yeah.
And I don't think organizations did a lot of that.
No. And according to the research, it's the women leaders in the organization that are focused more so on these issues than the men, which in turn creates in themselves an internalizing of that pain and the problems with their team members and the organization at large around these issues. So that also creates more stress
on the
women more so than on the men. So anyway, it seems like, again, like a vortex of concern that's going on.
You're absolutely right. And I know Anthony had asked, what are some of the things that we did? One of the things I put together very quickly was a task force, specifically healthcare task force. And I got several people out of different parts of the organization to talk about what are the things that are needed. One of the things we did is we created a wellness room. We didn't have that before. So we created a wellness room that is, I don't want to call it a Zen room, but it is a room that individuals can go into, and you can do whatever you need to in that room. And, you know, it helped. It's so funny. When we opened it up and I was talking to our executive team, they're like, people are going to go in there and nap. I'm like, I don't care what they do, but let's let people have an opportunity to at least have a place that they can go that's away from their desk if they need to deal with something, if they need to do a telemed. Because remember, telemed became very, I mean, that's what we were doing. And so it gave us an opportunity to have people use that room. The utilization of that room has been absolutely amazing. And we didn't even think that would be the case. And so that was one of the things that we did. And again, we worked with Cigna, who's our healthcare partner, on several different things around mental health. And we added more programming with mental health and doctors that individuals can go to. So we just really broadened what that was.
It sounds like you're really working hard to remove the stigma around that.
Yeah.
To normalize, not normalize it, but you know what I mean? It's not everyone may go through.
Yeah.
It's possible for everyone to go through at some point in their lives, and especially now with all that's going on. Well, so what's next for you on this journey that you're on?
You know, I don't know. That's a great question. Outside of the fact that I have shifted a lot of the board work I do, and I love the boards that I sit on right now. So it's been meaningful work for me. I had the opportunity to be the event chair for the Susan G. Komen this year, the Atlanta Pink Walk, because I had a very dear friend of mine who she, during 2020 and the pandemic, had been diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and we lost her in December. And so that was so important for me to have an opportunity to do that. I think, you know, it always goes back to, okay, what's my purpose? Like I keep saying, okay, grandmother, are you gonna tell me my purpose? Like, are you gonna come to me and tell me what my purpose is? Because I still kind of sit with what's my purpose. I'm hoping to get my book written so that I can reach more people. I am hoping that I can continue to grow myself personally and professionally in the things that I'm doing and that I'm working on. I know that there's some opportunities that continue to sit with me with the Atlanta Braves. So I'm hoping to do a lot more work with the community and how we are serving the community, our fans and our staff. And so it's one of those things where I'm still trying to figure that out. It's like, who am I going to be when I grow up? I'm still trying to decide what's that going to look like. So I'm still trying to decide what that's going to be.
That's funny. Well, you know, it sounds to me that you have a very strong sense of your purpose, and that you're living it out with great courage and confidence. So thank you for this and for the contributions you're making to our listeners today. We're going to take a quick break to look at what's coming up next at TurkNet, but I want everyone to stay on because we have one final question for DeRetta. So Kathy, can we bring you on and ask you to tell us what's going on at TurkNet?
Well, before we get there, we have some questions that have come in.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes, let's do that. Let's go through the questions.
Because they've been flowing in. So DeRetta, here we go.
Okay.
What is your perspective that when a top level, senior level woman seems to fail in a particular role, but a man fails and isn't successful, others don't seem to see that result the same way?
Agreed. I think that one of the things I like to talk with our executives about is what are the other things so if you line it up and understand what success looks like for individuals in a role, have we done that for that particular individual? If it's a female, are there other things that she's having to experience that the male counterpart is not having to experience? I think when we start being much more specific on the individual and not so and not just kind of glaze over, oh, it was a male or a female and that's what happened. What actually happened with Robin, and what are the things that we need to think about? And do we need to go back and look at what we have done in the organization that did not support her? Because, you know, and people say this all the time. I don't think people come to work and say, what am I going to do to fail today? Like, that is my goal. Like I don't think people come in and say that's what they want to do. And I have found that when I have had specific development and career discussions with individuals, either they're not in the right role, they are not provided the right level of support. And when you start having those drill down conversations of that, is it that we need to shift work? Is it that we need to put them in a new role? Is it that we need to really look at what is going to look like, what success will look like for this individual? And conversely, how is it going to be successful for us in the organization as well? I don't know if we have those type of conversations all the time. And I think that when we begin to do that, you can pretty much make determinations and individuals will come to you. I've had people say to me, if I've talked to them and said, okay, this is not the position for you, or we're exiting you out of the organization, they will look at me and say, oh my God, I'm relieved. Like I've been doing this all this time and I am tired and I know I'm not doing this well and this is not the role for me. And so I think when we start having those conversations early on and start talking with people and shifting them and shifting their roles and their responsibilities, we would get a different outcome.
Mhm.
Okay, great answer. Our next question, how optimistic are you for women in the workplace in 2022? And what can organizational leaders do to improve that scenario?
So I will have to say to you, I am always optimistic, because if I was not, I would not be doing the work that I'm doing, because I do think that we are seeing a shift that's happening. You know, with leaders, like I said earlier, it's a dual responsibility. It's just not for the person or the individual and them having the word that I absolutely love that Anne used on emotional mastery, or having EQ, or having the ability to do really well in your role. The other piece of it is that we as leaders, we owe individuals the opportunity for growth and development and giving them feedback, having those conversations, talking about what are the things that we can focus on that can support you. One of the organizations that we partner with specifically at the Braves is called Tone Networks. I love the CEO. Her name is Gemma. Gemma is amazing, Gemma Toner. And she has created this broadcast network group that basically is micro learnings and is specifically for women. And so we actually licensed it for every single woman that works for us in the Atlanta Braves. And I've had individuals say to me, the fact that I have kind of my own channel and I can go and say, I want to focus on this, this, and this, they were like, this is great as an opportunity, but that's not enough, right? That we've got to do leadership training. They need to be coming to TurkNet to do leadership groups. I mean, it's all of those things that I think that are going to help us basically build up our women leaders so that they have the confidence to move into roles and to accept things and take them and shift them and move them and make it their own. And so that's why I'm encouraged, because I have male counterparts that want to do the same thing. So if we can start doing this as a collective, inclusive group of individuals, I think we're going to see the mark change dramatically, especially with the numbers of women coming out with degrees and advanced degrees.
And also, can I chime in? I think
Yeah.
this also addresses the sense of isolation that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Having this network outside of work with other women, perhaps.
Yes.
So that's what Women in Leadership and the Signature Series is about, is to help women not to feel isolated in their experience.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I love this next question. How do you see the younger generation of women, Black and white and other, and how different from you at your early career stage?
So the difference that I am seeing is that we talked about purpose and going back to purpose. You are finding in this generation, they want something that's more holistic as opposed to just coming into work and leaving. And I think we as organizations need to find a way where there's a connecting point that they can have, that if it's about being in your community and doing volunteer work or whatever the case may be, that we have that as an extension of your job. Because that's what I'm seeing and hearing people say. The other thing also that I'm hearing them say is that I should be able to advance much more quicker than you had to, right? And so why is my trajectory supposed to be the same timing as your trajectory? And so I think we need to begin to address that, to talk about there are things that you need from an experience level, and we need to be specific about what that looks like. What I am encouraged about, because I have a lot of younger professionals that come in and talk to me, and they talk about, I really do want to learn, and help me in terms of how does that look and what do I need to do? And so I think what we need to start doing as the elders in the organization, I would say, is that we need to start encouraging that thirst of knowledge and supporting them and thinking about very specific projects that we can begin to have people work on. Have very specific career paths and career tracks so people know what they can look to. Because I think in my career, I never really had a plan. Like it was never, oh, DeRetta, you're going to be an HR manager, and then from a manager, you'll be a director, and from a director, you'll be a VP. What I was always encouraged to do is just work hard. Go work hard. And all the other stuff will come. I think that you are finding our younger professionals, they're requiring us to give them something that's a little bit more than just go work hard. And I think that we as organizations, we can do that. Like, we can easily set up a plan and be very specific. And in that plan is peppered the opportunity for you to do community work, board work, whatever it is, because when you're getting that level of skill as well, all you're doing is bringing it back to the organization, and it benefits both. So I do think we're going to need to think about that and have a much more specific plan for individuals as they're walking into their careers.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right, this is an interesting one. Can you suggest strategies for situations where you bring up a microaggression to a male who then gaslights you and makes you feel like you're just being super sensitive?
Yes.
She took a deep breath there.
That is a really great point. So this is what I will say when those type of situations happen. So I have a strategy, good, bad, or indifferent. I have two of them. I typically put people like that in a box. They put them in a box, and I put them on a shelf. I remember that whole encounter. I remember that exchange, but I put them in a box and I put them on a shelf. Because in some instances, you're not going to be able to shift that person, and that's not the person you need to spend your time and energy on. And you need to, and so I'll say, if it's your boss, you need to think about that and what that looks like. If it's a colleague, you definitely can think about what that's going to look like, because there's different approaches you're going to have to do with both. But I put individual in boxes, and when I have to deal with them, I take them out, take them down from the box. I make notes in terms of how I need to engage, and then I put them back in the box. What happens from my perspective, and I've had that happen to me on several different occasions and several different jobs, is that I could not exasperate my energy on that particular situation moving forward. I had to figure out a strategy where I can move around that or through that, and the box scenario always worked. The other one that I do is that I love characters. I love Disney, love it, love it, love it, love it. So what happens if I am in a situation and I have that very thing that happens, they become a character. They become a Donald Duck. They become whatever character you can think of. They become a character, because characters can't hurt you. And so when you think about it from that aspect, all I'm saying is that I want you to have a strategy so that it does not impact you and what you do moving forward, and figure out what that looks like. When you become a character for me, it's so easy. I can have a conversation with you all the time because you're not real. And so you just figure out those type of strategies you do for yourself. Now, if they're being detrimental to you in the organization, I would say there are other things you need to think about, and how do you actually address that? And it may not be going to that individual anymore. It may be escalating that. But I just would say, think of those different strategies, because what I don't want you to do is diminish your voice and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to move forward. If you're doing good work, people are going to gaslight you all the time, and understand that. And sometimes you may not even know what they're saying. So just be mindful of that as well as you're moving through that.
Wow. That was very good. Okay, let's see. This is from Kim. What are some recommendations for leading as a team of one in culture and organizational change? How can I advocate for building a paid team to better support the needed people work?
So I will tell you, and that is a hard thing, because when I worked for one of my organizations, they would say to me, "You're overhead, you're good overhead, but you're overhead." So you think about, you start, what I have done in those particular situations is I have put metrics together that really speak to culture, ROI, and what is really needed for the work that you're doing. What I have found, because most of the time I'm dealing with CEOs or CFOs, and they want to see a bottom line and an ROI, you can easily attach an actual financial number to engagement, to turnover, to all of those things that you're working on to support the organization, because the highest expense that any company has are their people. And so when you're able to start putting that together and putting a metrics in place, and you can say, if our turnover is this, or our engagement is this is what we're going to get from a workforce perspective and for efficiencies, they begin to listen and understand what that number is, and they begin to appreciate that. I have been able to set up metrics and dashboards within our systems that we have, where our leaders can go and look at it, and they can see exactly what their spend is on both their ROI, their hire, how they've onboarded and hired, all of the metrics that are important as it relates to people. So that's one of the strategies that I've used, and it has worked. So you also, when you use that strategy, you then equate it to the number that you need. And I will tell you this, when I walked into the Braves, and this is sports, like sports, they're like, why do we need HR people when it's about the players on the field? And so when I started talking about our ratios, so if I have one HR person to 500, the level of service they're going to get is going to look very different if it is in industry standards of one HR person to 80. And so when you begin to start talking in those numbers as well, and be able to give specific examples of what that service looks like, 500 to 80, that's another way for you to be able to talk about building a paid team to do the work that you need to have done. You've got to quantify it, because that's what they understand. And so if you're able to do that, it works. And it's so funny, when I did my first session because I have 3 bosses. I have 2 CEOs and a chairman. So for my first CEO, and I'm having this conversation, I'm giving him these metrics. He said, I've never seen those before. I said, not a problem. Let me tell you where I got it from. This is where the research is. Like, I went in around the metrics, and because he's a trained engineer, he got that. And I was able to get the head count that I needed. So we can talk offline about what that looks like, but I would want you to use metrics to get to where you want to with adding head count.
And can I just say, DeRetta, that makes sense now that I know, saw your title, Chief People Capital Officer.
Yeah.
That has real financial implications versus Chief People Officer. And I wondered if that capital was there for the financial implications of the work that you do. Is that possible?
So it was for metrics. It really was. It was for me. So it's funny, because when I came into the organization, we were called HR, and there was all of these things that I was hearing and the perspective of HR. So I go into my CEO. I said, "Oh, I'm changing our name." He said, "What are you changing it to?" I said, "I'm changing it to People Capital." He said, "I'm gonna still call you HR." I said, "Okay, that's great. I'm changing it to People Capital." So we started branding everything. I got logo shirts. I had everybody wearing them, and we got to the So now we sit in meetings, and he may slip up every now and then, but he calls his people Capital now. So there's something to be said in a name, but it really was, I really wanted to be laser focused on the value that we also have in this organization and the work that we do. It's no different than what we do
Absolutely.
from a revenue perspective and all that good stuff.
Okay, we have one last question. We had a lot of questions today. And this one's very interesting. This goes to your mental health topic. I read an article last night that asked the question, why aren't we all totally losing it in the midst of global warming and pandemic, insane politics, supply chain issues and shortages, and all of that uncertainty in the world today? As an HR professional, do you think we are all unwell?
Wow. Wow, DeRetta.
It's so funny. I don't. And let me tell you why I don't. We may be burned out. We may be, stretched, but I think we as HR professionals have always dealt with these type of issues and have been balanced in doing that. I think what shifted for us is that we went into a hyper situation where we were dealing with all of it. And all of it was so tangentially coming at us all at the same time. I worry more about our sustainability because we have been running for so long through all of this. But I don't think we're unwell. I think what happens, and I'm sure most HR professionals experience this, people come to you and are looking for guidance from you. And so I think we have to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, that if it is mental health days we need to take, if it is going to our therapist that we need to do, if it's going to have a glass of wine and having a glass of wine and eating, then that's what we do. We just need to take care of ourselves, because what happens is we're taking care of everyone else. And that's one of the things I think I really experienced when, again, talk about what we've dealt with. A lot of my leaders never dealt with doing furloughs. They never dealt with having to have very difficult conversations like the ones we ended up having to have. And so we end up being the tools to support them in doing so. So I wouldn't say that we're unwell. I would just say that we need to take care of ourselves so that we can be able to do what the organization needs us to do.
Okay. Well, now we're going to be moving into our PowerPoint. Everybody stay tuned, because DeRetta is going to be giving us her one word after we get back. And Eve, if you could bring up the PowerPoint, please. Thank you. Okay, so DeRetta, I do want to say this. I love your leadership with Susan B. Komen. I literally have pink hair right now because I dyed it pink in October for Breast Cancer Month. It's a cause that's very important for women. Also, I cannot wait to hear the recording of this session because of so many wonderful ideas and sound bites that have come out of it. I want everybody to know we are going to send you the video link after this is over, as well as this PowerPoint. So y'all just relax. You don't have to take notes. So our next slide is about our next meeting. Our speaker will be Amy Alvarez, and Amy is with Make-A-Wish Foundation. She is the Marketing and Communications Officer. I met her through Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. She helped our group with Shamrocking for a Cure, which I'm going to plug. Is going to be in March of this year, and it is to find a cure for cystic fibrosis. But Amy is just the most amazing person. I cannot wait for y'all to meet her. She is a founding member of Do the Work, which is a digital community centered around anti-racism work. She's a real believer in human connection and just a spark plug, powerful woman. So y'all are going to really enjoy meeting Amy. She's the craziest Puerto Rican woman I've ever met. She is so full of life. She is just wonderful. Okay, and our next slide. This is just a wonderful slide of all the great speakers we're going to have in 2022. We're going to do a hybrid this year. So we will do 8 virtual sessions, and we will do 4 at the Commerce Club. Thank goodness we're returning to the Commerce Club for those of you who are in Atlanta and can join us. Our first in-person speaker will be Dr. Beverly Tatum. Then we will have in June Patty Dismukes and Penny Collins from WIT, Women in Technology. In September, in person, we'll have Allison Osmond from Delta Airlines. And then in December, Paige Alexander, who's with the Carter Center. As well, look at all these great speakers we're going to have virtually. I can't even tell you who I think is the best speaker. I mean, they are all powerhouse women, and we're just so excited for this schedule. And I'll be sending this to you right after our session today. So on the next slide, our pricing this year is just amazing. For a full year, you can have all 8 virtual sessions plus the 4 in-person sessions for $400. And what's really popular right now are the tables, and they're going like hotcakes. For 8 people, $2,500 total. So please give me a call. Information's on here. I'll send you the flyers. I'll send you all the links right after this. But the table has become the most popular one because it's 8 seats and you can vary it. So if you want to have people come one meeting and then another, you can pull people in and out at will. And our next slide, our wonderful podcast. Anne Coelho is the host of Barrier Busters, Women of Character. This next one that will be coming out this month in the next few days, but we will send you this little introduction to it, is Elise Hammett. And it's just a fascinating story. She shares her story of growing up in Middle Georgia, overcoming many, many personal tragedies, and through it all discovering her why. Aren't we all trying to get our why? We will send you this link, but you will also get the link for the entire podcast. This is such a great series. I do recommend that you go to our website at turknet.com and look for Women in Leadership and look for our podcasts. They are amazing. And then our next slide is from Susan Hitchcock. Susan, who was the original founder of WIL, and the person who is now in her time of 100% flexibility, and I've never seen anybody work harder during a retirement than Susan Hitchcock. She does these wonderful She Rose podcasts, and they're on our website at turknet.com under Women in Leadership. But also, Susan is doing a grandmother project. She is gathering stories of grandmothers. And DeRetta, I know she's going to be asking you for yours. And she's going to be putting together all these wonderful stories of grandmothers who have shaped our lives. And if you, I'll send you a link also for that so that you can get in touch with Susan directly to contribute to the grandmother project. It's going to be something else. Okay, our next slide. In the midst of the Great Resignation, we at TLG are here to help our clients. Our newsletter for December tackled the topic, why do employees stay? Instead of why do employees leave? Why are they staying? What can you do to encourage employees to stay with you? And culture is a big one. So we do engagement and culture surveys. That is a real big strength of TLG. We would love to help you. Please reach out to us if you're interested in us doing a survey for you. And then our next slide is just about staying in touch with us. Let's get social. Please sign up for our newsletter. Please reach out to us on LinkedIn. We have a weekly video from Tino Mantella that is incredible. We are on no, we're not on TikTok yet. We're on Twitter. I want to be on TikTok. That was a Freudian slip, y'all. Facebook and YouTube. Yeah, I'm ready to start dancing. And then our next slide is contact information, our address, email, phone number, and I'll be sending that to you. So now we're going to switch back to Anne and DeRetta. So DeRetta can talk to us about her one thing and her TikTok.
And I love to, I love to, I don't know if I'll do one, but I love it. I love it.
Well, you may have an opportunity. So this is when we ask you for the one thing that you want to leave with our listeners today.
So the one thing I would want to leave is give yourself grace. And let me say this, I say that to you all, and I am still working on it. Okay. But I will say I had an experience in one of my roles, and I had a leader who this was a bad day. She had told me I would never lead people, that she went through all of these things that I was just not good at. Like, and one of them was leading. And there was a woman in the organization who was a mentor of mine. She called me, and she knew I was going to have this meeting. You know how you can kind of anticipate something's not going to go well. I knew the meeting was not going to go well. I didn't know it was going to go as bad as it did, but I knew it was going to go well. So she called me because at the time I was sitting in a cubicle. It was out in the sea of everyone else. And she called me, and I'm trying to keep it together. And she said, "Hey, how'd it go?" I said, "It did not go well." And I'm talking cryptically, right? And she said, "Okay, well, get your stuff and go home." I said, "I can't go home." She said, "Yeah, you can." She said, "Say that you need to leave for whatever personal reason, because you are not doing well. You need to get your things and go home." I said, "Okay, I don't understand." She said, "I need for you to be able to fight another day. Get your things, go home, do whatever you need to do so you can come back tomorrow and you can address and deal with what you just got." And in that moment, I didn't understand what she was doing. And then later on, when we talked about it, she said, "I needed for you to give yourself grace in that particular moment, because you were not as bad as you were told, and you were probably not as good as you think, but I needed for you to give yourself grace." So we need to give ourselves grace.
And I would imagine that resonated with many, many, many people, and many more as others listen to this recording. So thank you so much, DeRetta. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. And I hope everyone has just a wonderful holiday filled with peace and joy and family and love. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye, DeRetta.
Bye-bye.